This poem is entitled Self-Erasure as Applied to My Memory from my chapbook, Secondly Finally, which you can find on organicweaponarts.com. Self-Erasure as Applied to My Memory. 24. It was the season of ghosts locked in the window panes and the cellar lamp. The grindstone abandoned amongst the coal. Generation after generation, it was the year the abandoned house down the block burned to the ground. And then another fell into itself, and both sprouted into strange mansions with ghostless windows and storyless attics. My grandmother became the bedsheets, though thinner than the bedsheets, until she vanished like the words, "I love you," just hours after I said them last. Sometimes I believe I had, in a way, given her permission to go. My ego tells me this. It was the year the ego grew legs and made things tumble and burn. It was the year I didn't sleep, but could not leave my bed. It was the year of vanishing, which I had learned from the dead. It was the year I became the pipe, then the couch, and then the air as it whistled through my bones like a bolt. It was the year I did not eat unless it was moonlight or blue light from the television. It was the year I did not dream and spoke only in curses. It was the year the magic fell dead in the street like a struck crow and darkened beneath the cars as they left and kept leaving. That year my friend was murdered, and though I can remember his laugh and his hair, how it came to a widow's peak, his afro a kind of curled crown, I recall nothing else, not his eyes or his body, and now barely his smile. That year my grandfather died too. I can remember him shaving, but I cannot recall his face, or the hair that must have been there. That year the crops which had not been grown on our land for 100 years came up through the floorboards and from the faucets, and all of our mouths were full of grain and corn and drought and shadows. It was the year. I lived on a train and passed the rusted shipyards outside of New York, heading into Connecticut. The train burned and burned like a whistle and drove straight into the sea. That year, from the windows which I guarded like a ghost, I watched someone else's grandfather feeding his cat on the countryside. The man gazed out into the horizon as though he noticed just then half his life was missing from his memory. I am told that it too was the year I was dying. I would sleep on the kitchen floor after each meal, a plug of tobacco tucked gently into my lip as though it were a thing that could wake or wake something in me. Some dream seed rupturing in the mouth. I don't remember this. It is a false memory. It is the image of the Mona Lisa as described to you by the janitor of the Louvre. And though he or she knows the painting best, the coy look of mischief, the conquering nature of the eyes, without seeing it, that image is not yours, or even mine. Just as each story that has ever been told is hardly a replica of light. It was the year I remembered and remembered and remembered, as if the act of remembering was like sharpening a blade until the blade was gone. Only a hilt now. Only nothing. It was the year when I was 24 or maybe 12, but probably 6. It was the year in which all years became the same and my whole life existed in a single moment. One dream fading away, a block of salt worn by rain, drop by drop. 12. It was the season of ghosts in the wind and abandoned coal. Generation after generation, the house burned to the ground, fell into itself and sprouted strange, ghostless windows, a storyless attic. My grandmother became thinner than the words I had given her. My ego tells me it was the year the ego made things burn. It was the year I didn't leave my bed. It was the year of vanishing, the year I became the pipe, Then the air as it whistled the year I did not eat. It was the year I did not dream and spoke only in curses. Magic fell dead in the street and darkened and kept leaving. That year my friend was murdered. His laugh, his afro, a curled crown, I recall nothing else. That year my grandfather died, shaving, but I cannot recall his face. That must have been there. That year 100 years came from the faucets, and all of our mouths were full of drought and shadows. It was the year I lived in the rusted shipyards outside of New York, and burned like a whistle straight into the sea, which I guarded like a ghost. Someone else's grandfather fed the horizon his memory. That year I was dying. I would sleep on the floor, a plug of tobacco tucked in my lip as though it were a thing that could wake some dream rupturing in the mouth, described by the janitor of love and of mischief. It is not yours or mine. Each story is hardly light. The act of remembering, like sharpening a blade. It was the year when I was, or maybe, but probably, it was the year in which all years became the same, and my whole life existed in a single dream worn by rain. 6. It was the season of ghost, wind, and coal. The house burned to the ground and sprouted storyless words. I didn't vanish. I became the pipe. Then the air. I did not eat the dream, only curses dead, dark and leaving. That year was murdered. That year came from the faucets and burned like some dream rupturing the mouth.